Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2015. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, a look back at Fukushima's radiation trail. Then, the bill to ban water guns on school property. And the smear machine attacks Rand Paul. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
I mean, these are villains, folks. It's not like they don't know. They're running the scam.
With the slogan, "Defeat the Washington Machine, Unleash the American Dream," Rand Paul began his 2016 presidential campaign, formally announcing it today. And of course, the Washington Machine is not very happy. The empire strikes back. We're going to talk about what happened today. But first, about Rand Paul. They say he took aim at his fellow Republicans. Of course he did. Railing against his party for succumbing to special interest and framing himself as a fiercely anti-establishment figure who would appeal to a broad swath of the electorate. That's the way that Politico put it. They quoted him saying, "Too often when Republicans have won, we have squandered our victory by becoming part of the Washington machine." Yeah, we're looking at you, Boehner, McCain, Graham, McConnell, the Republican leadership. It's the Republican establishment that has betrayed us right after the election. Of course, they didn't do anything that they campaigned on. We've got people who are camping out at Boehner's office saying that they're not moving on, he's not moving on the abortion bills that he promised he would do. And of course, they're going to get arrested. They're pushing back that way. They're not going to change and do what they said they would do. Immediately after the election, they repudiate everything they ran on. He says, if we would support a candidate who is simply Democrat light, then why bother? What is the point? Well, of course, the empire, the Washington establishment, doesn't like that. They don't like somebody that's pushing back. It's clear that the greatest threat to them is Rand Paul. And so what do? The warmongers are coming after him the very day of his campaign. They launch a $1 million ad campaign to lie about Rand Paul. An article on InfoWars.com, Steve Watson points out that they are slandering Rand Paul, and he calls them warmongers. Exactly. They're people who are selling war. Just like a fishmonger, somebody who sells fish, these guys are the war sellers. He says, an establishment Republican front group that is set to plow $1 million into a slanderous advertising campaign designed to depict Paul as dangerous and standing with Obama. Yeah, right. According to a SourceWatch, the group was founded in 2008 specifically to receive donations for John McCain's hawkish presidential campaign, quote, as much as possible up to the limits of the law. And of course, the law allows quite a bit. The law also allows quite a bit of anonymity as to what those sources of money are. They say the fear-mongering ad concludes with images of civil unrest and a mushroom cloud. Where have we seen that before? As Alex Jones pointed out today, we've seen that, of course, before with the campaign of LBJ versus Goldwater, trying to paint Goldwater as the man who would unleash the nuclear bomb. And of course, that ad only ran once, but the media ran it over and over and over again, firmly establishing it in the minds of the voters. They're trying that same trick. Of course, John McCain, who's intimately involved with these war sellers, it's ironic, isn't it, that the biggest warmongers would show him as someone who's going to give us a nuclear threat. He knows how well that worked. He's old enough to understand that. Someone as old as McCain, as he said, he's old as dirt, but what's worse than his age, and his age isn't a problem. You could have an honest person who is old, that's not a problem. The problem is that he's a bitter, angry, and I would say psychotic kind of Dr. Strangelove figure. He and Lindsey Graham, who we are told is contemplating a run. So maybe that's what this is about. Also, YouTube went after Ron Paul, or maybe somebody used YouTube to go after him. Maybe it was the bots that took it down, but we have seen this happen with the INFOWARS site numerous times. We've had a lot of false, malicious claims to shut us down when we went after Sandy Hook, talked about what was going on there. The idea is, even if this is going to be put back, the idea is to break the news cycle. That's the real thrust. Censor him while it's announced, on the day that it's announced, try to break that momentum. So they mount a $1 million slander campaign and then shut down his side of the ad. And of course, that is on YouTube, reported by the Washington Post. Now, one of the things I think that's wrong with this country, of course, we've talked about this many times, and that is the way the police are trained in this country. I would say not trained in this country. Let's take a look at two stories that came up on the Daily Mail. Two car chases, two different countries, and two very different outcomes. Now, in the first case, we've got an American tourist in Thailand. And what happens is it's a very chaotic traffic environment there. They drive on the different side of the road there, being a former British influence there. They don't drive on the same side of the road as Americans. So she goes down a road, she gets confused, and she starts panicking. At that point, the American woman, after she drove the wrong way, she started accelerating. She hit someone on a motorcycle, then she kept going. She hit other vehicles, 13 at last count. She even hit some pedestrians. What did the police do? Did they pull out guns? Did they shoot her? No. Actually, they did pull out some guns. They shot the tires to stop her. They shot out 3 of the tires before they could get her to stop. She apologized. Of course, the crowd was extremely angry. A lot of the people that she had hit, that she had nicked, were very angry. The police had to protect her from the crowd. Nevertheless, they kept their training. They didn't shoot her. And she said she had simply panicked. But what happened in America when this happened? Well, we see in the same publication, Daily Mail, we have a case. Of course, this happened a couple of years ago, but on the same day these two things come out, we have a situation where you've got a couple of people driving a car. They are going to be pulled over by the police. They panic. Why would they panic? Well, it seems like in America we have a history of killing people for no reason. These two individuals were doing nothing other than not pulling over. It turned into a car chase. It lasted for about 20 minutes. And at the end of it, the two occupants, who were unarmed, were killed. Now this cop, this has happened a couple of years ago, is on trial. Only one of the 13 police who were shooting is going on trial. This particular individual, though, stood on the hood of the car and fired 15 shots through the windshield in a gunfight that killed the unarmed couple. They say he's now facing 2 counts of manslaughter. And what happened with this? There was 137 rounds fired by the 13 officers. After the car had stopped, after everybody else had stopped shooting, this individual, his last name is Brello, jumped on the hood of the car and fired shots into the passengers through the windshield at close range. The passengers had never fired any shots back at anyone. Now, through this, he had fired a total of 49 rounds that night. It involved 60 police cars, 104 officers were involved in this, but they turned this into a Bonnie and Clyde episode. For what? These were not serial killers. These were not bank robbers. These were not people who had shot up bank after bank like Bonnie and Clyde. Why would they shoot their car 137 times? Why would this individual fire 49 shots, 15 of them standing on the hood of the car into the windshield? It's the way they're being trained. And when we look at this, we have to ask ourselves, I think, do we really want to have an army of police that are trained like this? This is a systemic problem. In this particular case, this individual is being tried for manslaughter, but we see over and over again that individuals who shoot unarmed people who are no threat to them whatsoever, and that's the key. It doesn't matter that somebody is breaking the law. We don't want to have an army of judge dreads who are judge, jury, and executioner on the streets, who can't control themselves, who go into a fit of rage, or who go into a panic. The Thailand police didn't do that. Why can't we have American police who don't do that? We used to have American police who didn't do that. It's the way they're being trained. And of course, the way we stop this is by reducing the number of police, by arming the public. We need to understand and remember, as I pointed out before, posse comitatus is not simply an act. Posse comitatus is the power of the community to protect itself. The community should have the power. The police can be there to guide it under emergency situations. When you do have a real Bonnie and Clyde, call out the posse comitatus to deal with it. You don't need an army of policemen. You don't need 60 police cars and 104 police officers firing 137 bullets at unarmed passengers. But what do we have instead? Instead, in this country, we see now a bill that's passed the Tennessee House of Representatives. You would think that a southern state might value firearms and the right to keep and bear arms more highly than they do, but this is the Tennessee House of Representatives that passed a bill last night that would make it illegal to have a squirt gun. a squirt gun within 150 feet of a school. Now, of course, we have a federal law, which I think is absolutely insane, that says that you cannot have a gun within 1,000 feet of a school. But this would be part of a larger bill that would even bar people who have a concealed carry permit from taking guns into parks, because I guess they're going to turn the parks into a gun-free killing zone. That's what happens. That's why I don't support them having a ban on guns within 1,000 feet of schools, because we've seen how that works out. We just saw how that worked out in Kenya. It works out the same way here. Now, in other news, of course, there's another intractable problem, not just the police state and the police violence we see here, but of course, Fukushima. It just keeps going. A new article came out today, and it was covered on the Drudge Report. Fukushima radiation has reached North American shores. They point out that scientists at the Wood Hole Oceanographic Institution detected small amounts of cesium-134 and cesium-137 in samples of seawater that were taken, in this case, from Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Now, they try to assuage us each time by telling us, don't worry, these levels are very low. But understand that these levels that radiation is cumulative. And if radiation is in all of the seafood that you're eating, then it is accumulating each time you're eating the seafood. And we should be concerned about this because Fukushima is still not under control, and because we could have this incident anywhere. Now, this is not something that is new, of course. We have pointed this out over and over again for years since this happened at INFOWARS.com. It isn't just that they've discovered that there is an elevated level of these isotopes. These same isotopes were pointed out to be present back in an article we had on April 26, 2012. Fukushima is falling apart. Are you ready for a mass extinction event? Do you think that was over the top? Well, they were talking about these same isotopes. They said, maybe you've heard about sick seals, polar bears, tainted fish, mutations in dandelions, and so forth. They said that they found 40 million becquerels of radioactive iodine in seaweed. Now, they say, if you don't know how much that is, they say it's quite a bit. And of course, it is permeating and spreading throughout the Pacific Ocean. Now, of course, one of the things they mentioned in that were the sick seals. We got more verification of that in an article in January 26, 2014. University of Alaska scientists say that Fukushima radiation may be making Alaska seals sick. Again, the same isotopes, talking about cesium-134 and 137 found in muscle tissue from control and diseased seals. They discuss the wildlife health implications from different possible routes of exposure to Fukushima fallout, to the ice seals. Now, of course, we also had a story about another effect of the Fukushima radiation. In 2013, October 21st, melting starfish along the West Coast prompt Fukushima concerns. In this story, they said scientists are attempting to find out why one species of starfish is literally melting in the waters off of Washington State and Canada. Strangely, the symptoms have only been seen in certain areas of Washington's Puget Sound and Canadian waters. While the verdict is still unknown, many are pointing fingers to Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant, which has continued to leak over 300 tons of highly radioactive water into the ocean every single day. Of course, that was on the west coast of America. But this is something that permeates through the Pacific Ocean. And as we can see in this story from 2012, May 2012, Fukushima, California tuna have high levels of radioactive cesium. In this particular case, they were talking about bluefin tuna. Now, these were tuna that had migrated from the Japan coast to the California coast. So in other words, they're starting out close to where Fukushima is. They found radiation levels that were 10 times normal in these particular tuna. But then when we look at another story from June 9th, 2014, we see that albacore tuna, which are not starting at Japan and migrating to the west coast of California, they're in the Pacific Ocean, not as close to Japan. Still, they're seeing a tripling in the level of radiation in albacore tuna. Again, repeating the idea that, don't worry, the radiation levels are low. But as they pointed out in the article, you can't say there's absolutely zero risk because any radiation is assumed to carry at least some